Bonjour, and I hope you're having a lovely day or evening, wherever you may be. I've just got out of the bath, and I was laying in the bath thinking and watching some various documentaries on YouTube about religious strife and all the friction that's going on in the world and everything. And as thoroughly depressing as it is, it does make one think rather in depth about such things. So I was going to put a huge, great long Facebook post, you know how some of us self-righteous twats do. But I thought, no, I'm going to do a little video because otherwise this thing is going to end up at least 20,000 pages long. And I think when you read something like that, A, you lose the will to live, and B, you can't always get the context of how it's being delivered by the person. So, I'm going to let this flow, see how it goes. There's a few points I want to try and cover, but I may deviate. I more than likely will deviate, so we'll see how we get on. So I was watching a documentary. There's a little clip of Richard Dawkins, now famous biologist, wrote many books. The God Delusion is one of them. I think that's probably his most acclaimed one. And he was going into schools in London and teaching biology. Now, he is obviously a scientist, Darwin, theory of evolution, etc., etc. And a lot of his class were Islamic children. I'd say sort of around, I'd say probably 13, 14 years old. Now, it was really interesting to watch as he was talking from the point of Darwinism and the evidence in science to point towards, the evolution of man, etc. And the one thing when he tried to engage these students with is the fact of no matter how much evidence he put forward in their direction, they would always fall back to, but it's what I believe, or but it's how I was brought up. And you could see the conflict in these teenagers' heads of, I've been told this is how I live my life, this is what I believe, but even when I'm given really strong evidence to the contrary, I don't want to let go of those ideals that I have. Now, you can understand it. As far as I see, I'm not a religious person, but I completely respect people who do want to believe it because I can understand why human beings would want to believe in a celestial entity. Because, as Christopher Hitchens put it, the late great Christopher Hitchens, who's a bit of a hero of mine, he said that religion was mankind's first attempt of trying to understand the natural world around us. As we've evolved and we became sentient beings, we look at the world around and we think, how does this work? Thunderstorms in the sky, the sun rises and falls, and the moon, and everything around us. We had no idea how any of this worked. And we are generally very insecure creatures. We had to hunt to survive and everything that went along with that. So we naturally created our own ideas of where these things came from and how the world works. So, and religion, because when you die, if you believe that that's just the end of it, it's a very hard thing to accept. So therefore, the idea of an afterlife and life actually having some kind of meaning brings hope and comfort to people. So back before sort of civilization and mankind had various rituals, maybe praised sun gods, etc., the gods of the hunt, all these different ideas, is because you lived in a world where you couldn't explain anything. And also the world is a very, very dangerous and horrible place. A bad winter could kill all your crops. Your family might not survive the winter. All these different things of trying to survive, you had to have something to hope and believe in. Otherwise you would just go completely spare. So religion was created. And as mankind progressed, the religions progressed as well. The complexities in the religions progressed. Until you get things like, for example, Islam, Christianity, all these ideas, these huge weighty tomes of books with all these ideas of how to live your life and how to follow came about. And so we can understand why people want to believe in things. So we're very insecure creatures. We want to feel we're part of something. We want to believe in something because it gives us hope for not only our lives and how to live our lives, but also for when we die, that there will be something at the end of it. Now, that's all well and good. And people are free to believe in whatever they like, but there is a problem. And one of the big problems is that I find is when religion is used as a moral compass to live your life by or to create laws to live by. And it's for this reason. Now, something else Christopher Hitchens said is that the fact of the idea of a religion and the idea of a God being basically the dictator who says to you that, you know, gods is supposed to be this all-loving, all-wonderful everything, but they can be extremely vengeful and spiteful creatures at the same time. If you read any religious text, you know, you've got the forgiveness, you've got the loving, the welcome into the kingdom of heaven, but you've also got fire and brimstone, floods, plagues, you name it, it's all there. So these gods aren't quite all that they're cracked up to be in the lovey-dovey department. So the problem is, when these texts were written, now with religion, if you actually look through history at how or even look at people today and how people react to certain situations, the very sort of integral parts of what makes us us, you can understand that how religion came about. But you can also understand when people say, God made man in his own image. I don't believe that. I believe man made God in his image. Everything about religion screams man-made. All, you know, the ideas, the stories, the exaggerations of things, you know, the wanting to believe in things, all of that, you just look at people in general and how people behave on a day-to-day basis, you can understand where ideas like that come from. Now, the problem is, with these ideas, as Christopher Hitchens said, it's the fact of having a God and a religion that says that basically before I gave you rules to live by, so whether it be the Ten Commandments or whatever Islam has. Now, first things first, I'm no expert on religion, and I'm going to try not to say what I think religion says or what it doesn't say, because a lot of people will jump on various bandwagons saying, oh, well, I've heard that this, and I've heard Muslims do this, I've heard that Christianity's this, and a lot of people don't know the full picture. So I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon. I'm just going to jump on the idea of how religion itself, whatever the ideas involved in religion are, when they are used in the context for living your life by it, where the problems will arise. But I may hint at various ideas, but it will be with an idea of if this is what that religion says. So the idea that before the Ten Commandments and before the other laws that were laid down by our supposed gods came along, that we couldn't survive. You know, we had no moral compass. We were just complete anarchy, is absolute bollocks. Mankind would not have progressed as far as we did to that point, say 2,000 years ago, if we didn't have some kind of moral compass that came about by, you know, whether it was talking, whether it was debate, whether it was philosophy, or whether it was just the natural feelings of survival and the fact that human beings had to survive by being in groups in a very harsh and dangerous world. All this was around before religion put its stamp on it and said, this is how you must live your life, by these codes and these rules. Now, with human beings, as we've evolved, because that's what actually happened, mentally we evolved as well. And here is the main problem. Religion, if you lead your life by a religion and a certain religious text or doctrine, you stagnate yourself because that was written at a certain period in time. Now, 2,000 years ago, the world was a very different place. You know, the areas that these religions sprung up in were under, you know, in a lot of turmoil, and unfortunately, a lot of these places still are. And they were written for certain mindsets of a certain time. Now, as we've gone on, say, in the last 2,000 years, our ideas have changed. Hopefully, we've grown as a civilization, and we've started to understand that a lot of these ideas that we lived our life by, you know, as the centuries have gone on, haven't always been the best ways to live. And therefore, through discussion, through changes in human behaviour, with general, hopefully more acceptance of each other, we've started to realise what things are important in life and make the changes necessary. I mean, let's think about it. Women, on the whole, have pretty much had it really hard for a very, very long time. It's only within the last, say, well, really 100 years after, you know, the women going into the factories and World War II, you know, the suffragettes movement, women had to be standing up saying, look, we have a voice and a brain too. We are not just a pretty little piece of property to hang off a man's arm. This was, in the grand scheme of civilization, this is comparatively a very, very small period of time in which a lot of these changes have happened. Now, and also with the idea of homosexuality, because let's be honest, any half intelligent human being can understand that who you love does not matter. Hopefully anyone with a grain of intelligence can see this. What sex you are does not matter on how you are going to be at your job. A job, for example, is a certain set of skills that you learn and you apply to do a task. Being a man or a woman does not really come into the equation. Especially, mental capacity. Okay, there may be a case to be argued that men are built physically stronger than women. You could argue that case, but sorry, in today's society, that's not really an issue and not a problem. Now, again, with your sexuality, it does not matter. Who you love and in what way you love them, as long as nobody else is getting hurt, then what's the problem? We should be a bit more understanding that what you do is up to you. And some people will be uncomfortable with certain ideas, but it's understanding that you may be uncomfortable with it, but unless there is a serious fundamental issue with something that somebody does, then it should be a case of live and let live. Now, in homosexuality, for example, the fact that where was I going with this? Yeah, with religion, homosexuality is one of those main things that still causes a controversy today. In certain religions, it's still frowned upon. In some religions, it's still, if you're discovered to be homosexual, a death sentence. Now, the thing is, in normal rational society, where religion hasn't taken a hold of policy and lawmaking, we approach these ideas and hopefully we discuss them, we debate them, we put forward new ideas, new concepts, and we struggle to try and make change for a better world and a better way of living. Now, we can do that through rational thought, rational thinking, and as I say, debate with each other and find out what is important and what isn't, and how the interests of not just the individual but everybody involved can be addressed. If we can do that, we move on as a civilization, we move on as a species, and hopefully we create a better world to live in. But if you live by religious ideals that are, say, stagnated in their time, religious texts, and depending on how stringently you lived by those texts, there is not that room to grow. Because, say, it was an idea, it was a set of ideas set back in a certain time. If you live by that concept, you are living 2,000 years ago in a very, very different world. Now, you could argue, oh, well, it was a better world back then. I can pretty much assure you, and you can look at the world around you to prove that it wasn't. Now, by doing that, by living by a certain code of ethics that was set down by human beings, whether you believe in God or not, the fact that if you do believe in a God, and a God set down rules 2,000 years ago, hopefully he's a wise enough celestial entity to allow the fact that people change. If he doesn't, then he's a bit of a dick. So, living by religious texts, you do not allow space for change and for mentalities to grow. And because of that, you get all of these problems. Now, it would be a really horrible thing to say that people would choose irrationality and blind faith and belief in a text that was written 2,000 years ago over modern thinking and debate and all the things that create, like I say, a better civilization. Rational thinking, people sitting down and rationalizing things. And the fact that people will believe blindly in this other thing rather than rationality is such a scary thing. But so you can understand why people do it, because it is a scary world to live in, and we all want that little thing to hold on to. If there is no God and there is no divine plan and there is no grand meaning to life, we are all out there on our own with no meaning and no, apart from being born, eating, sleeping, breeding, and all the other things that go with living a normal life. If you die and that's the end of it, it's a very, very scary thing to have to confront, and I completely understand why people want to have some kind of solace and sanctuary in a belief system. But, and generally for the majority of human beings in the world, it's absolutely fine. People get on with their own shit. They're not worried about what everyone else is doing. They live their life the way they want to. They're probably generally okay people, and they die, and then whatever happens to them happens after that. But when you've got people who are letting, so religious doctrine, determine how laws are made, then you've got serious, serious issues. Because, say, it's an outdated practice in the modern era. And because of that, that is why you get such discriminations. That's why you get such ridiculous ideals. And watching people when they debate these kind of things, especially when you usually get someone of a religious background debating with perhaps a scientist or a humanist, it's a really, really scary debate to watch, because you can see from the humanist's point of view, or say the scientist, whoever it is, that they're in stunned disbelief that a human being can believe such things as religious things in the face of such evidence to the contrary. And I've watched lots of documentaries with religious scholars and debates talking about religions, and unfortunately a lot of the time various non-religious people will tend to lump, for example, the practice of Islam, everybody into one group, like the whole thing with extremists and everything that's going on at the moment. It's a very dangerous way of thinking, because the fact is, the way I've heard Islam is it's a very open to interpretation kind of text. So therefore, people will practice it in different ways. People will practice towards the Middle East, I guess, a harsher and more old school, for want of a better word, style of religion and practice, while people towards in the more Western world have a more, I guess, kind of liberal, relaxed attitude. Now, I may be wrong there, but I do know that the fact is Islam and its practices are practiced differently in different countries around the world. So you cannot turn around and say, lumping all Muslims together and saying, this is what Islam is about, this is blah, 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 it's all bad, it's all extremists, it's all terrorists. That's utter bullshit. That is like saying that all Christianity is represented by the Westboro Baptist Church. It doesn't work, because people practice it in different ways. Yes, there are problems in certain areas of the Muslim world, and there are certain things that we in the Western world will look at and think are degrading, that we think are unequal, and some things that we do really frown upon. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in those countries too who frown upon it as well, but there is an underlying current of fear in some of these countries. And on watching various, say, TV documentaries, and especially interviews with people who have a more hard-edged Islamic view, they are very reluctant to answer questions that are put to them when pointing out some of these very hard, like the oppression of women and death by stoning and various things. So if you want to leave the Islamic faith, in some countries you will be stoned or you will be killed. Now, some people say that's not true, other people say it's true. Some Muslims I've watched being interviewed in some of these countries where extremism is a problem have that kind of, we know it's true, but we feel embarrassed about talking about it. So there are these problems in these countries and with views and practices we do not agree with. But there are, remember, all these people who are subject to these kind of rules and regimes, they are aware of it too, and a lot of them probably aren't happy with it either. But again, fringe groups and extremists who take ideas and will generally, they'll turn them to their own agendas, because this is what religion has done throughout millennia. It's a set of ideas that people will use, and the idea of God and wrath and the Almighty and eternal damnation will be used to manipulate and control the populace. This has been the way of things for years and years and years. Because you have to remember that religion, if there is no such thing as a God, okay, you believe what you want, if there is no such thing as a God, these were man-made rules that have been applied to civilization. and they can be used in ways for people to get what they want. And they have been used for years and years and years. And religion is one of the biggest scapegoats for people getting away with absolute atrocities. But you can blame the religion if you want. But remember, a religion is just a set of ideals. People have brains in their heads. People can choose whether to follow them or not. Granted, there may be the fact of a lack of education or naivety or abject fear of being brought up in a select group where if you are told, if you leave this group, your life is in danger. Of course, people are going to basically stick to what they know because that's where they feel safe. So you can understand, to stand on your own or to leave a religion and leave a certain group of people is a very, very hard thing to do. And sometimes it's a very dangerous thing to do. To stand on your own, have your conviction of your own beliefs, and to be able to, through reason, debate and rational thinking, maybe have your beliefs changed because you see a better option or an option that makes more sense, shows a very, very strong character. And unfortunately, there are not a lot of people who have got that strength and belief in themselves to be able to do that. You know, we're not a very strong species when it comes to, I know I'm putting the human population in a very negative light here, but when you think about everyday life, of how easily we are manipulated by things and how easily we can follow trends, follow ideas, because we feel that's the way we should be going, because we want to be part of something. You can understand why people do this kind of thing. So after all that talking, whether that's actually made any sense or not, who knows, but the idea is that using religion as a form of law or as a code to live your life by, for the majority of people, especially as a code to live your life by, there are some nice ideals in there, but these aren't ideals that can't be reached by common sense and reason. They do not need a religious text or a celestial deity that doesn't exist to introduce them and say, this is a good way to live. You don't need a book to tell you how to live your life and to know how to treat each other decently. You can look at the world around you, you can see people inflicting pain on each other and think, that's not something I want to be part of. Anything you choose to do in your life, you can do through your own reason and listening to the ideas of people around you. My ideas of things have changed many, many times over the years because people have put forth good arguments. And good arguments with a solid grounding are worth more than a million religious texts. So that was very, very long, I know, and I do apologise for anybody who's watched this. But it's just one of those things that, you know, where you get something in your brain and it frustrates you so much that you just want to release to the world without making a mess. So, goodbye from me. Enjoy your weekend.